times on X from January up to July 2024, breaking his own platform's guidelines relating to disinformation. This according to the Center for Combating Digital Hate, and according to our very own calculations, we found that Elon Musk has published in the first 3 weeks of October at least 28 fake news stories on his account on X, which were viewed over 540 million times on his platform. Here's the first example and a most recent one from October as well, viewed in this post alone over 26 million times, posted on October 23rd, where Elon Musk posts this alleged, as he says, insane story by The Atlantic titled "Trump is literally Hitler," a fake satirical article, of course, a story that was debunked by The Atlantic themselves on their website, as they clarify a distortion of a real article that they published on October 22nd, titled "Trump, I Need the Kind of Generals That Hitler Had." So just one hoax, the latest in a long series of posts by Elon Musk spreading fake news about the U.S. presidential elections.
What are the main themes, then, of the misinformation spread by Elon Musk?
Well, Mark, we found that the main themes of misinformation that were published by Elon Musk were later amplified by the Republicans or the extreme far-right party, far-right extremists. These themes were mainly relating to, as you can see here in blue, viral misinformation about the aid for the victims of Hurricane Helene. Then in purple, in this graph, fake news relating to electoral fraud. In pink, immigration, and then in orange, fake news related to the media. So we have some examples to show right here from October, notably concerning the viral misinformation and baseless claims spread mainly by J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, who basically claimed that Haitian immigrants were eating domestic pets and cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. I would say that this was the most viral piece of misinformation pertaining to the 2024 electoral campaign, as Elon Musk published these claims by sharing this video of an alleged Haitian descendant woman describing why Haitians eat cats. This post reaching over 60 million views on X, hence supporting these baseless claims on his platform. And finally, less than a week before the election, Elon Musk is spreading misinformation that the presidential election could be subject to fraud, electoral fraud, mainly with this post claiming that Michigan has more registered voters than eligible citizens, he asks. So a post here viewed over 32 million times on X, pushing this widely shared electoral fraud narrative that is also widely amplified by pro-Trump supporters and the far right.
So it seems that Musk either just tweets what he thinks or what he sees, and doesn't put any real sort of sense of editorial evaluation into what it's doing or what it's achieving, or he's being really manipulative and trying to stir the pot of mud, shall we say. Catalina, what kind of sources do we think Elon Musk uses?
Well, we found that much of the fake news spread by Elon Musk comes actually from accounts that have been flagged for spreading misinformation on social media, mainly on X. The Observer's team here at France 24 found that Musk regularly publishes and shares content from at least 15 different, not so reliable accounts, such as this one from Dave Rubin, who is a conservative YouTuber who was hired by Tenet Media, who recently was found to be a production company that turned out to be secretly tied and financed by Russia. So with over 203 million followers on his platform, a phenomenal ability to propel topics into the American public opinion, as his publications also benefit from a very high algorithmic push in his own platform X. Surely this type of misinformation will have an impact in the choice of American voters tonight. So let's take the 2020 presidential elections as an example. A study published in March by the IMT found that swing states were the target of more powerful online disinformation on X compared to the rest of the country.
So since Musk bought Twitter, it's taken a angle towards the hard right. I can certainly see that in things that appear on my timeline, which is alarming. This has been used to propel certain parts of misinformation or fake news in order to gain some kind of political traction in some way, shape or form. And exposed here by Catalina how this is being used perhaps by foreign agents to their ends as well. Catalina Marchand de Abreu with Truth or Fake, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you all for watching wherever you are across the world. Stay with us. We've got more analysis and reaction and prediction in the US elections to come.
France 24 et RFI présentent
Now is the time.
This breakthrough is the answer to the prayers of millions and millions of people.
Together, because we love our country, we're here to fight for our democracy.
And we will make America great again.
When we fight, we win.
Which direction will America take? Find out on November 5th, only on France 24.
This story is no fairy tale.
She's hard to beat, but it's of course possible.
Katie Archibald does it again.
The hero is always the enemy.
It might just be between me and him.
Crushing dreams is how to reach yours.
I just want to leave it all out there.
This rivalry for this sport is such a positive thing. I'm in it for the fight.
It's a 1v1.
Rivals above all. Every round of the UCI Track Champions League is live on Eurosport and live and on demand on Max.
On France24.com. Click Live. Find the stories you want to watch or to read about. Live news 24 hours a day in 4 languages. Explore the topics that captivate you. Are you looking for the latest news or to watch a show on demand? Follow us. Live international news is just a click away. Liberté, égalité, actualité.
Right here in the Bronx.
And are we ready to fight for it?
Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Watch the final countdown in this historic election on France 24. Watch USA 2024, the American presidential election, live on France 24.
This is Prime News Paris. I'm Mark Owen. We're focusing on the US presidential election. These are the headlines. Thank you for joining us. As we speak, the USA is deciding Kamala Harris or Donald Trump for the White House. Reportedly, it's a race that's too close to call, according to the polls from right across the country. Kamala Harris, well, she's in Washington. Donald Trump is in Florida. Harris urging her supporters to get out and cast their votes. She also said that she'll not be distracted by opponents' insults. It has been that kind of election campaign. Trump says he will accept defeat if he judges it to be a fair election. And that's the thing, if he judges it to be a fair election. There's no evidence of voter fraud this time, nor last time, in spite of Trump's remonstrations in defeat. Both candidates have been talking up their chances, as one would expect, even as the first result came in as a 50-50 split. That was in Dixville Notch in New Hampshire, a place that traditionally reports the first result in any election. Let's get an update from one of those swing states. Wasim Korne, our correspondent, is in Phoenix, Arizona. And Wasim, as I understand it, abortion there is on the ballot.
Abortion is on the ballot, as you mentioned, just like in 9 other states. But abortion here is on the ballot in the form of a citizen-driven ballot initiative called Proposition 139. Those are initiatives that end up on the ballot for citizens to vote yes or no on. In this case, Proposition 139 would enshrine the right to abortion in the state. It would actually change the state's constitution in the form of a constitutional amendment to protect the right to abortion up until fetal viability. Currently, the law is a standard 15-week limit, and of course, supporters say it will give more rights for women. A lot of healthcare workers we spoke to said it was not okay for some women to have that limit of 15 weeks because some women find out that they have an ectopic pregnancy or a miscarriage in the weeks following that deadline, and that they are then unable to get that care. Opponents of this proposition say that this 15-week limit works for the vast majority of women and that it shouldn't be changed at all. But across Arizona, across the country, in those 9 other states where abortion is on the ballot, of course, this was also a technique that Democrats, progressives hope will galvanize the vote on the left, that citizens, that voters, especially women, will show up, vote yes on these propositions across the country, and also cast a vote for Kamala Harris for president.
Is there any sign on that, Wasim, that this crossover issue is going to help the Democrats?
Well, we've seen polls in the past few days, past few hours, in fact, and even early returns of the number of men and women or Democrats and Republicans registered in states across the country, showing that this message, that women really rather are in the last few days breaking toward Kamala Harris, or at least showing up in larger numbers than they were in the past. So some analysts, and this is again very, very early, are perhaps a little bit optimistic that this may actually push the election in Kamala Harris's favor in the last few hours as polls continue to remain open across the country. But as you mentioned earlier, I mean, this is a very, very tight race. We've spoken to women on both sides of this proposition, women who do believe that they need more rights, that the government should stay out of any interference on a woman's body, and of course other women as well who do believe that this 15-week limit on abortion here in the state of Arizona is enough. So could really go in either direction.
Hear what you're saying, Wasim, completely. And on that issue about government interference, it's often men making decisions about women's bodies, which is even more distasteful for many, and one can understand why. Just in the name of balance, Wasim, I've got to ask you about the Republicans. Any sense of what they're saying there?
Well, really the main talking point in the state of Arizona for Republicans has been immigration. We've heard that message really for the past 4 years, ever since Joe Biden took office. In the first few months of the Biden administration, Biden appointed Kamala Harris with a mission, the mission to target 3 countries in Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, to try to root out the causes of the mass migration toward the U.S.-Mexico border. And obviously these are problems that have been going on for many, many years, even decades, and so these were not going to get fixed in just 4 years. But this mission that Joe Biden gave Kamala Harris has earned her the nickname on the right of a border czar, and she's been painted as the person who really let down the country, turned the U.S.-Mexico border into a wide open border where anyone could really walk in. And so over the past few weeks and months, we've seen Republican candidates Donald Trump. J.D. Vance, his running mate, even on the Senate level, like Kerry Lake, for example, here in the state of Arizona, really single out that long list of economic woes and tying them all to immigration, trying to tie those issues to what they are calling an immigration failure, saying that, for example, that houses are being built and they're being given to illegal aliens, that thousands of kids who don't speak English are being dropped into the public school system and therefore impeding everyone else. So this is the kind of messaging we've been hearing. Immigration is also another proposition on the ballot, Proposition 314. Among many other things, it would make it a state crime for anyone to cross into Arizona other than in a port of entry, and it would also allow local and state police to make arrests on anyone found to enter Arizona illegally outside of those ports of entry. And you can imagine that, of course, this Proposition 314 is on top of the list of concerns here for Republican voters and Republican politicians in this state.
So two propositions there, 139 on abortion and 314 on immigration. Wasim, as always, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to date.
And 11 others in this state.
I was going to say, I bet you could go on for a lot longer. Thank you so much indeed, sir. We'll have more from Wasim, of course, throughout the night. He's staying in Arizona throughout. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Let's go to Pennsylvania, which is regarded as the jewel in a very thorny crown of swing states. Philadelphia is our next stop. Jessica in Missouri is there for us. Jess, give us a sense of what is happening where you are. What's the temperature of Philadelphia?
Well, I'm actually just outside Philadelphia in the suburbs. I'm in Bucks County, which in the past two elections has voted Democrat. But I'm in a pocket in Bucks County, in Levittown, where there seem to be mainly Republicans. And that's interesting because in general, in Pennsylvania, in the rural areas, Republicans have more support, and in the cities, in the town centres, then the Democrats have more support. And the suburbs are very important for Harris. And what I am observing here is that most of the people coming to the polling stations I'm standing next to are actually voting for Donald Trump. That's what they've been telling me. Is this a sign? Very hard to tell. Really, this is such a close race in Pennsylvania. But what these Trump supporters have been telling me is that they are fed up of high prices, of inflation, the price of gas, and that they really are focusing on bread and butter issues, that they think that it's Donald Trump who's going to make their lives better. That said, I have also spoken to a few Democrats here who say they don't believe for a second that Donald Trump will help the working man. They think that Harris will have their backs. So really a mix of different opinions here, but on the whole, more Trump voters in this pocket here.
Indeed, economy, the big issue for most Trump supporters. Inflation, though, currently down at 2.4%, which kind of says that things working with Biden, the Democrats, and the continuation with Harris in charge, perhaps just pointed that out to something that is very rarely highlighted when people say Trump is the king of the economy. What are the issues there, then, Jessica, across Philadelphia, across Pennsylvania? What are the things that are playing large there?
Well, as I said, it differs in the town centres as opposed to the rural areas. If you go out to the rural areas, people are worried about the economy. They are also worried about freedom. That's how they describe it. They think that the Democrats will take away gun rights, take away their freedoms. And on the other hand, in the cities, in Philadelphia, let's say, people are worried about democracy. They're worried about a woman's right to choose. They are worried about the direction this country is going, but for different reasons from the Republicans. People here today have also been talking to me a lot about immigration. They have bought the rhetoric from Donald Trump that Harris will leave the borders wide open. He's dubbed her the border czar, and that she's failed to close the borders. And that's really resonated with voters in this area where I am. So immigration, a big issue for them, but not so much for people in city centres.
Women's rights, Jessica, and clearly it's one of the issues that the Democrats are very concerned about, and abortion is one of the three key issues across the US, and I imagine that is exactly the case where you are.
Oh, absolutely. One of the Democrats I spoke to earlier had a pro-choice T-shirt on, and she told me that a lot of women are going out to vote on this issue, and men too. It was interesting because on the train to Pennsylvania, to Philadelphia just yesterday, I was actually sitting next to the man who had made, I don't know if you saw, that advert for the Democrats that was voiced by Julia Roberts, in which you have, it portrays a woman who is going to the polls wearing a Trump hat, a very bling Trump hat, and then she peeks up whilst she's actually behind the screen to make sure that no one is looking at her vote, and instead of voting for Trump, behind her husband, who is a Trump voter's back, she votes for Harris instead.
Jessica Missouri in Philadelphia, or thereabouts. Thank you very much indeed for joining us as ever. Always illuminating, Jessica. Thank you for being with us. And I can reassure you that Jessica will have more throughout the evening from that position there in one of the most important swing states, Pennsylvania. Still with us here in the studio, Robert Parsons, our chief foreign editor. Rob, we've spoken about foreign policy issues. We've spoken about Ukraine, the importance of a victory either way for Volodymyr Zelensky and what happens with the war against Russia. One of the other big burning issues in the world today, of course, is what's happening in the Middle East with the war in Gaza, the war in Lebanon, the possibility of that spreading further, Iran's possible involvement growing, those kind of things. Give us a sense of what either candidate means for that scenario.
Well, you know, I think with Kamala Harris, you'll probably get pretty much the same as we've seen with Joe Biden, although she will come under immense pressure to be tougher on Israel. And I think she's much more likely to get tougher on Israel than Joe Biden because of his past and his long-standing relationship with Israel. You know, Kamala Harris has seemed frustrated, particularly frustrated with Benjamin Netanyahu's government over the last few months. And I think she will use the most recent warning from the US government just 3 weeks ago to the Netanyahu government that unless they did something to drastically improve the amount of humanitarian aid that was getting into Gaza and to make it systematic, that the United States would consider taking measures like reducing the supply of military equipment to Israel. Given the fact that since that warning was made, Israel has taken steps against UNRWA, you know, the United Nations Organizations for Palestinian Refugees, which will seriously, drastically undermine the supply of humanitarian aid even more to Gaza than before. It's possible that if she becomes president that, you know, when she gets the chance to make a difference herself, you know, she wouldn't be inaugurated until January, of course, that she would follow through on those sort of threats to the Israelis, which is why, for sure, Benjamin Netanyahu favors Donald Trump as the next president of the United States. He has a good relationship with Donald Trump. They see eye to eye on a lot of things, have got a similar outlook on the world. You know, when Donald Trump was president the last time, he was very strong in his support of Israel. You know, unlike previous administrations, he decided to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the Israeli state. He decided to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. You know, things that no other U.S. administration had ever contemplated. So he will continue to be very supportive. He's made that clear, you know, in recent weeks to Netanyahu, when Netanyahu was in the U.S. just not long ago, that, you know, you just get on and do what you need to do, is what he said to Netanyahu. But there's a problem in it, I think, for him, you know, because at the same time, Trump does not want to see the United States dragged into conflict in the Middle East. He's made this clear repeatedly, that, you know, that he wants to keep the United States out of conflicts which are far away and which are unpopular in the United States. So if Netanyahu decides, for instance, that he will respond to perhaps another attack from Iran in response to the last Israeli attack and attacks Iran again, Israel can...
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen.
The former president has long touted unsubstantiated claims that the 2020 election was rigged, prompting anxiety that violence could erupt if he is defeated once again. But after also casting his ballot in his home state, Trump told reporters he would accept the results.
If I lose an election, if it's a fair election, I'd be the first one to acknowledge it. Of course, there'll be no violence. My supporters are not violent people.
Florida has been trending to the right for several years now, and the Democratic Party has not won a statewide seat since 2018. This presidential election, the state has 30 out of 538 electoral college votes up for grabs.
Eliza Herbert with that report. Let's get more news from on the ground. Washington, D.C. Let's go back there where Francois Picard is waiting for us. Francois joining us live throughout this programme and, of course, throughout the evening, throughout the wee small hours there, bringing us all the developments as they happen from the U.S. Capitol. Francois, great to see you, sir. Tell us, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What's the feeling where you are?
It depends what echo chamber you inhabit, Mark Owen. And that's one of the big difficulties with this election. It was interesting to listen in that report to Donald Trump saying that we'll never concede. This morning, he said that this race is ours to lose. Same thing on the Democratic side. Earlier, we were speaking with Congressman Glenn Ivey of nearby Maryland, who saw signs that it was positive in their direction. And nowadays, well, when people get their information, they're not looking to find out who's winning sometimes, but who will comfort them in the ideas that they hold. That's the difficulty, and perhaps one of the reasons why there are these fears of violence afterwards is that more and more it will seem unbelievable to your side if the other side wins.
Indeed, Trump saying what he says about if it's a fair election, there'll be no problems, he'll concede. And his supporters are good people, they're not violent people. That's what he said a little earlier on. Does anybody feel reassured by that?
I mean, right now it's just rhetoric, it's just talk. We'll see what happens when the polls close. In 2020, we thought Donald Trump was going to bed at Mar-a-Lago on the night. Remember that the election took 5 days to be determined one way or the other before Joe Biden won the state of Pennsylvania. Will Donald Trump actually refrain from stating that I won the election on the night, even if results are not in? It was 2:30 in the morning when he did so last time on the night, and he didn't have results in a lot of places yet. So that'll be, of course, one factor to watch. There have been instances of disinformation that have been cut off at the past, suspicions of disinformation floated by even foreign players like Russia, says the Michigan Attorney General and the FBI. For now, things going off smoothly in the overwhelming majority of polling stations. Remember, we're in this strange period, this hovering period, Mark Owen. First polls closing in a little under 3 hours' time. It's getting to be afternoon and then evening here in Washington. And we're going to slowly see that tension start to build. For now, though, it's the calm before the storm.
The calm before the storm, and you giving us the context. Francois, great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Francois Picard joining us live from Washington. Francois with us throughout the evening here on France 24, bringing us developments from the US Capitol. It's the economy that is one of the big issues, of course, and here to talk more about that is Yuka Roya. Great to see you. Americans then casting their ballots. The rest of the world watches, as indeed we are, as the outcome of this election will have global implications, including very much on trade and the economy. Businesses all around the world then, in many ways, holding their breath.
Yeah, indeed, especially for a potential Trump win. Tariffs and trade wars, of course, were a prominent feature of Donald Trump's first presidency. But now he wants to get even tougher on this, promising to impose a blanket duty of 10 to 20% on all imports. A recent survey showed 44% of German companies, for example, fear Trump's return to the White House would negatively impact their business. French firms are equally worried. Trump has doubled down on his position that revenue from those duties could be used to make up for major tax cuts at home, as Brian Quinn takes a closer look.
In his closing campaign arguments, Donald Trump once again returning to his favorite economic policy, tariffs. This time as a strategy to stop the flow of deadly opioids across the Mexican border.
But you sell fentanyl into the United States through Mexico, we're putting a 25% or so tariff on until such time as you stop doing it. And they're not going to do it for long because that is a massive penalty.
It's just one of many problems that Trump, whose previous term featured a tariff-based trade war with both China and the EU, plans to solve via slapping duties on foreign imports. Trump wants to cut traditional taxes on corporate profits from the current 21% rate down to 15% for companies that use American labor. He's also floated proposals to eliminate the federal income tax for police, firefighters, and the military, as well as on tips, overtime pay, and for Social Security benefits, even suggesting that the federal income tax could be replaced altogether by tariffs.
Look, I had a lot of tariffs. I took it. The most beautiful word in the dictionary to me is tariff.
Most economists agree that tariffs almost always result in higher prices for consumers as import costs are passed on, essentially amounting to a significant sales tax. Independent analysis estimates that Trump's policies would amount to an annual tax cut of $7,000 to $36,000 for the richest 5% of Americans, with the rest of the country paying $800 to $1,800 more per year, all while adding as much as $10 trillion over the coming decade to the U.S. national debt.
As we saw in that report, Donald Trump's presidency was marked by trade wars and tariffs. They began in 2018 as his administration slapped tariffs of 25% and 10% on steel and aluminium imports, though some countries later obtained exemptions. With China, the spat escalated, with Washington slapping multiple rounds of punitive duties before the two sides held trade talks. Other protectionist measures included duties on solar panels and washing machines, Mark.
Okay, how about Kamala Harris then? What's her take, her position on trade?
Well, she says she's not a protectionist Democrat, but Kamala Harris is not exactly a free trade Democrat either. While tariffs aren't covered in her official campaign promises, the vice president has spoken in support of using targeted tariffs to address economic and security challenges posed by other nations. She's expected to continue with much of her predecessor Joe Biden's policies on this, including a targeted tax on clean energy-related imports from China and a planned expansion of existing steel and aluminium duties. In fact, President Biden's administration has kept most of the Trump-era tariffs in place. Earlier this year, the government announced tariff hikes on an additional $18 billion worth of Chinese goods, including semiconductors and electric vehicles. A report by the think tank Tax Foundation shows that more revenue from punitive tariffs was collected under the Biden administration than during Trump's first term. The same report also estimates that those trade war tariffs will negatively impact America's GDP as well as others' GDP, of course.
Interesting statistics. Tell us about the markets then.
Well, Wall Street is in a broad rally on election day. Although the race is deemed to be too close to call anytime soon, investors were boosted by the latest data, which showed the US economy was stronger than expected in October. The VIX index, known as Wall Street's fear gauge, is well below levels seen during the 2020 election. Traders are also awaiting the Federal Reserve's latest monetary policy decision due out on Thursday, with an interest rate cut of a 0.25 percentage point expected. On the bond market, the yield on the 10-year US Treasury note spiked around midday, making borrowing costs, of course, higher for the US government, though it has since pulled back. The US dollar, meanwhile, has weakened against other major currencies, dropping about 0.5% against the euro, the British pound, and the Japanese yen.
Yukiroya with the business, with a particular angle, of course, on the US presidential election. Thank you very much indeed. Great to see you. You come back with more business, of course, in roughly an hour's time. So do stay with us for that, of course, and our continuing coverage of all events relating to the US presidential election. I'll be back with you after a very short break.
In the Bronx.
And are we ready to fight for it?
Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Watch the final countdown in this historic election on France 24. Watch USA 2024, the American presidential election, live on France 24.